no one will object, but if students miss this, I would love to be able to send it to them. And of course, send Neil and Arkady a copy if they'd like. But I am so happy to be here, and I'm going to hand the microphone over to Tomas, who's going to actually be hosting the panel. But before I do that, I just want to introduce the dynamic duo. I want to introduce Neil Goldmacher, who is the chairman of Newmark Knight and Frank. He will give you information about his fabulous background in a few minutes. And also Arkady, who is a senior vice president at CBRE and on the Dean's Board of Advisors. So without further ado, Tomas, you're in charge.
All right, great. I'm going to take it away then. So like Mary introduced, we got Neil Goldmacher in the call, as well as Arkady Smolyansky. Neil, I'm going to start with you. Could you tell us a little more about what you're doing right now? Obviously, you're the chairman at Newmark Knight Frank, but how did you get there? Kind of what do you do on the daily?
Sure. So I guess I would tell you that, first of all, I actually just chair a department of the company. It's way too big a company. I would not want to be chairman of our entire company. I really like what it is I do, and that's really chairing our tenant rep group. So, there's a lot of different aspects of commercial real estate that you can get into. And it's interesting, what Arkady and I do is actually a pretty narrow slice of commercial real estate. Arkady and I really focus on leasing of office space. And not only are we doing that, that's pretty narrow, because you could lease retail space, you could lease industrial and warehouse space, you could do a lot of different things. But Arkady and I really just focus on office space. And quite frankly, we both focus on what I call, the premier end of the market, higher quality companies, higher quality buildings, and mostly in major markets. So, what I do personally is I only do what's called tenant representation. So I've been in the business now for 31 years. And for 31 years, I've only done one thing, and that's representing tenants. And so the one nice thing about doing one thing is it's, being a one-trick pony is, if you do the same thing over and over again, eventually you get pretty good at it. And so that's kind of what I do. And what tenant rep means is that rather than you can represent landlords, and your objective if you're representing landlords is to try to, get the best, the most, more economics from a tenant. And you can do tenant rep, which is what I do, which is basically spending your time pushing back on landlords and beating up on them as best as you can in order to get the economics down on behalf of the tenants you represent. Arkady does something that I think is the hardest thing of all, because Arkady actually does both. And that's a very, you've got to be an extraordinary diplomat to be able to do both. And so it kind of gives you a feel for a little bit of what I do.
Arkady, I think Neil introduced you better than I could even, Senior VP at CBRE. Well, what do you got? What do you got going on the daily?
I appreciate it. So again, as Neil mentioned, I graduated FDU in 2006. At the time, I had already interned at CBRE, but I interned in their investment properties group, which is totally different than office leasing. That group primarily focuses on building sales, which is an entire different universe. Which again, it was nice to establish that relationship, because they, from time to time, they actually seek the leasing folks on, hey, what is this worth in today's market and where do you see it going, or historical comps. So after I interned there, I got into their training program, which unfortunately you don't have anymore, but it's it was a highly selective program. But throughout my internship, I just became friends literally with every single person in that office. So for me, my interview, they were basically like, hey, how's tennis and how's FDU? If you want to do this program, like, sure, just tell HR. So that was, that's basically how I got in. And, from that point on, I kind of knew that I wanted to do brokerage, but in that program, you rotate through different service lines. So I interned, I did a rotation through the agency group, which primarily only focuses on representing landlords, consulting, which does a deeper dive in, sort of more of the technical stuff in the leases, the research group, which is kind of the backbone of everything in the firm, global corporate services, where you're servicing an account, but you're touching everything across the globe or the United States. Sometimes you can travel to different sites. Retail, project management, asset services, which is, you're getting into the technical aspects of the building. And ultimately in April of 2008, I was like, look, guys, I thought I was a broker even when I was in this training program, except he paid me a salary, and got into brokerage in April of 2008. And, September 2008, the market crashed. And I was like, well, hey, maybe there'll be, less competition, and I'll do whatever it takes to survive and make it. At the time, I had a mentor who's, interestingly enough, actually came over from the firm. Neil, it was Sloan Rulin I started with. She actually was at Newmark and, got recruited by CB. And in April 2008, I started working with her. It was a combination of representing landlords and whatever tenant representation business she had that I could work on or that I sourced myself. And in, I would say, probably 2010, she actually retired and moved to the Cayman Islands because I did so well. No, just kidding. Not because of that reason. But she retired, and, I was kind of on my own. And at the time, I basically said to CB management, like, look, I know every single person. I know every single resource. Let me just do my own thing. And, I think that was instead of having one mentor, having, kind of a universe of, this person is good for financial services groups, or this person is good for creative companies, or this person I'm friends with, but they do a lot of landlord business and they could put me on assignment to work on. So kind of that, my business evolved, and I've been at it since. And, I can't think of a better business or environment or market to be in.
Yeah, that's great. And you certainly have the can-do, will-do attitude that's needed for the type of business you're in. Do you think that you found some of that at FDU? You mentioned tennis, and a lot of people might not know that you were playing for 4 years. You were an RA on campus. And for those that are joining us from the Finance Club, we're speaking with the founder of the Finance Club on the Forum campus. Arkady, what do you think? How was your time at FDU?
It was the best time. I would give up all my commercial real estate experience just to go back for 4 more years, but knowing what I know now. So it was pretty incredible. The tennis thing is a big thing, because that was, other than my internship at Smith Barney before CBRE, that was pretty much my main kind of job, which, again, if you're teaching private lessons or you're teaching clinics, it's always like, it's pretty, the earning is pretty good, especially while you're in college. And again, you always meet new people. So throughout lessons, it's always like, hey, what do you do? What do you do? What do you do? And, some of the business is actually, I've seen some of my business, come out of the tennis lessons. So that was pretty interesting. With respect to being an RA at FDU, that was amazing, especially when I got to run my own building. I just thought that, hey, you're going to be an RA, you're going to run a building, kind of looks good on the resume, and kind of, you can sell it to the real estate firms. That was my take on being an RA.
Got it. Yeah, I can agree, being an RA here as well. Definitely a rewarding experience, just as much work as it is. Neil,
Tomas, can I just add that I knew Arkady? Should I tell some stories about you, Arkady, when you were in college, or should I let those?
By the way, this is my favorite professor ever, Professor Betts. And maybe Neil did these deals, but Neil, in 2000, I think 5 or 6, I did a project, I think it was Finance 1 or 2, where you had to evaluate a company, and then you had to, say, is it a mature company? What should they do? So my prediction was, I evaluated MBNA, which was, they were at 9 West back in like 2004, 5, 6. And I was like, look, it's a mature company. They have these, affiliates with different brands. They're kind of mature. They're ripe for acquisition. And at the time, I don't know, I read Sandy Weil's Tearing Down the Walls and how he built Citigroup, et cetera. I was like, you know what? AIG should buy them. And this was literally a month before Bank of America bought them. And I was like, Bets, I know I'm definitely getting an A on this. Bets, you can tell whatever story you want. You're just
I don't
on mute.
think you remember some of the stories you told me. You wouldn't want me to tell them right now.
No, don't tell those.
Arkady is a memorable person. I've known him now for quite a few years. And he was a good student at the time, and I'm proud to call him a friend right now. Thanks, Arkady.
Maybe
Thanks,
some of those
Professor
stories.
Betts.
Let me jump in and ask Arkady how he would recommend any students in our finance group, our finance major, our wealth management concentration proceed if they are looking to get into commercial real estate as a field.
I think, do your research on sort of the major firms. I also think that, there's right within, the 10-mile radius of the campus, there's a lot of also owners that, they'll pay you a salary and bonus that you're not jumping into brokerage where you kind of have to, figure everything out on your own and it's commission based. But there's a lot of firms around the campus where, you could go work at a owner's place or a developer's shop and really learn the technical side of the business and, everything from how they run the company, how the financing works, how a deal is structured. And, I think that that's invaluable experience. And again, you're going to be, you can learn a specific market within New Jersey. You don't have to necessarily come into the city if it's inconvenient. I think that that's definitely interesting. There's also a lot of, trades to read, like The Real Deal, Commercial Observer, New York Post on Wednesdays, and the Wall Street Journal when they put out real estate articles. And, even if you just set a Google alert on commercial real estate, there's articles that pop up by the hour because it's such an important kind of factor in business. If you look at New York City, real estate is the largest contributor to New York's revenue.
Yeah, that's certainly a valid point. I want to go back, though, stay out of New York for just another question. Neil, how was your time at FDU? If you can divulge maybe your graduation year and kind of what the time was around when you were getting out of school.
Sure. I'll try to do my best. So, a couple of memorable things for me. I went to the Rutherford campus, which is no longer there. And the interesting thing about the Rutherford campus was, I think at the time, it probably was maybe 15 or even 20% were commuters. So it was a really interesting time. And what was nice for me was I got to know a lot of people who lived in northern New Jersey, who commuted, and it was an interesting mix on campus. Really enjoyed it and had a great time and made a lot of really wonderful friends. I would also tell you that that FDU Rutherford had an interesting cast of characters for professors, and I was full disclosure, I was an accounting major. And the accounting professors were pretty funny at the Rutherford campus. I'm going to probably, maybe no one on this call maybe remembers it, but there was a very senior professor named Stan Iwansky who taught accounting. He had been an auditor, I think, at Price Waterhouse for many years, and Fairleigh Dickinson had the good fortune to bring him on as a professor later in his life. And he was an extraordinary professor who really knew his stuff, but really engaged with the students and bonded with them. And he did so in many ways, but I will never forget that towards the end of the class that I took with him, he said, I have no idea if any of you are going to be successful or not. I certainly hope so. He says, me, I've done well. As a partner at Price Waterhouse, I live in a luxury condominium. I've got plenty of dough. It's all good. He said, so whatever you end up doing, he said, a few things to remember. Number one, you only have your reputation. So whatever you do, keep that clean. Always do the right thing. But if you do decide to embezzle, go big. Because if you're going to do it, really go as big as you possibly can. And it's much less likely that you'll be caught if you go big. Second is, if you do embezzle, and if unfortunately you get caught, I was not your professor. So these were the types of things that they would throw into the occasional lecture that I always remember. And there were a number of professors that had fun with us, but, you know, towards the end of a very serious, you know, auditing class, for him to kind of close out the year like that. And by the way, a really, for the years I was there, a well-liked professor, and we had a lot of fun with him. And he was really a great guy to go back and seek references from, and very helpful later on in life. So really great guy.
I'm sure with that advice, yeah, no doubt you'd make it far. But coming right out, you know, getting your career started, what were some of the biggest challenges you faced? You know?
Well, you know, what's funny, I was listening to Arkady, and he mentioned coming out and having a problem with the, with a financial downturn. I will tell you what was interesting is, so this will really date me, unfortunately, but when I started in brokerage, I started in August 1997. I'm sorry, 1987. And 3 months later in October, we had an event called Black Monday. And the stock market lost 20% of its value in one day. And it was fascinating. When I started in the business 3 months prior, I'll never forget, because they gave me my desk, they gave me my phone, they gave me all my stuff. And the guy sitting behind me said, "Wow, you picked a great time to start in brokerage." And I said, "Why?" He says, "Because the economy is great. All the financial firms are taking office space left and right. I mean, all you got to do is basically pick up the phone and offer them a piece of space, and they're going to take it because the economy is through the roof. Lucky you, great time to start." And that was, as I said, August of 1987. And 90 days later, the world came to an end. And so I guess my biggest—
Is that guy still in the business?
Pardon me? Yeah.
Who said that to you? Is that guy still in the business?
Yes, his name's Bradley Gurla, and he works at CBRE in your office, I think.
Yes, he does.
So the one thing whenever I see Bradley, it's nice to see there's someone older than I am that's in this business. I tease him about it whenever I see him. So it's kind of fascinating. I think that was a big hurdle. And then, you know, we haven't really talked about much of the detail of the business, but just a couple of interesting facts. When you go into brokerage, most of these companies actually don't pay you a salary. You come in, and oftentimes they give you what's called a draw against commissions. And not every company does this, but that's the way it was done when I started, you know, over 30 years ago. And so what was interesting was, you know, you were getting a draw which basically really didn't even cover your living expenses, maybe barely. And you know, as you would earn commissions, you would pay that draw back off over time. So for me, I remember the challenge was, oh my God, the world's coming to an end. I'm on this draw. How am I ever going to pay this off? Where's this going? This is like, I'm going down this drain, and this can't go anyplace good. No one's leasing any office space. What the hell am I going to do? So I'd say I think it was pretty startling. And I will tell you, it took me, it took my second year in the business before I actually made a commission that even started working into paying off that draw. It was a very tough time to start out. But, you know, the one thing I can tell you about commercial real estate is it's cyclical. It always comes back around. So, you know, it generally has these kind of, 7 to 10 year cycles. And so you go into a downturn, and eventually that's followed by an upturn. So if you look at our markets, they've just done this over the years, and they generally end up higher than where they started over a long period of time, which is very good if you're in our business.
Yeah, the business of no salary, it's, you know, purely commission, things like that. Arkady, what's your attitude on that?
I mean, I just can't imagine a world where I'm capped at what I could earn. You know, for me to wake up and, you know, there's been instances where there's a deal that Neil has on the other side, and I'm representing the landlord, and I'm like, listen, if Neil closes this, there's a couple of $100,000 that I'm making, so I'm betting on Neil.
So, hey, Arkady, were you on draw when you started at CBRE as a broker? Did they have a draw system there?
Yeah, they had, so I went out of the wheel program, which was salaried,
right.
Right into a draw. And again, when the market turned, you know, management every 6 months, you have a,
They
you know,
want to
like
see your
a,
pipeline. They want to know if you're going to make.
yeah, it's like going, it's like going into like the dean's office, like you did something bad. They're like, all right, what are the deals you're working on? And,
Exactly.
are we going to renew this draw? And you're like, whoa. And it's like the most terrifying thing ever. Now I look back at it, I'm like, by the way, the most important thing that I would say is when Sloan left and they said, hey, you can't just, be on your own and, you need to have a day-to-day mentor. And I'm like, look, Mary Ann Ty is my day-to-day mentor. I get meetings and I can bring her. And, the one thing that they, kind of had over me was this draw. I said, you know what, look, I don't need the draw. What if I take no draw? You can't tell me what to do. And what I did was I just, my lease was up. I moved home and I had no draw. And they're like, all right, no draw, no mentor. You're, free to go. And by the way, that was there was definitely a 6-month period from like March 2010 till August 2010. I remember because it was the only weekend I think I went out that summer where I finally closed the deal. A piece of the commission finally covered my last remaining draw because my mentor just, left the business and like kind of screwed me on the splits, and a little bit hit the bank account. I'm like, wow, like I can finally go out, the one weekend in 6 months. So I definitely remember that one time. So that was definitely a tough time, but not taking the draw and kind of rolling the dice, that kind of helped me, make sure that, you're jumping out of bed at 4:30 in the morning and, not going to sleep till, midnight or 1 a.m. for the first, 5 years of the business.
Now, we talk about these kind of time frames, and they're longer than you can think in this industry. Arkady, can you tell me something about like, shortest deal, longest deal? Which one was maybe the scariest, the worst, most memorable?
Like deals close, I'm just excited that they, I don't even, rarely I get excited. You're just like, oh, thank God we got it done. On to the, next 5 that are cooking. I just remember a lot of the bad stuff. The good stuff, I'm more like, all right, thank God that got done. But there's nice success stories. Like I was the agent for 399 Park, and, we struggled maybe for only 6 months to lease the building. And then the next year and a half, we leased probably maybe over the next 2 years, we had a lease up of 1 million feet. Which like on Park Avenue, a fully renovated building, unbelievable names from like the Pete Peterson Foundation, who was one of the original founders of Blackstone, to Millennium, who was a major financial institution, to, we even did one of our competitors' deals, which is like Savills, and every single one of those deals, you're learning, and you're learning from the landlord perspective, and you're also watching the guys on the tenant rep team like me or Neil, and you're just, you're learning stuff about them, see how they transact, so that was a, big learning experience. On the tenant rep, there's a lot of the time you close the deal and the tenant is sensitive to where they're going or what they're paying, and they're like, hey, by the way, we're reading all this news, we want no press. And to me, I'm like, guys, all I kept thinking about in this entire, 12-month period, like, what is the press going to say? How could you say no press? I hate when they say no press. The press to me is almost worth as much as the commissions. Do you agree, Neil?
Disagree. I just want the money. Could care less about the press.
I'm not.
But that's because I'm older than you are, Arkady. So at this point, I've had my press. I'm done. Just, I got teenagers I'm trying to pay for. It's expensive raising children, for crying out loud.
That's right. I don't have any kids. Yeah.
I can tell you why Arkady cares about the press. He's Mr. Motivation Monday. Guys, everybody in this call, you should definitely follow Arkady on Instagram, Arkady Media Group, first name Media Group.
Oh, man.
Inspiring stories. You get views like no other, right from the hands of the guy in Manhattan doing these walks on the daily. All these beautiful spots, places, it's all out there. Definitely give him a follow. Well, I mean,
Appreciate it.
definitely took a while to get there. Neil, when do you think was like that moment? Did it click somewhere in your career where you felt, yeah, I've made it?
So everybody has a different opinion about that. And I would certainly say that the one thing that I think is that I never want to think I've made it, because I'm exceedingly motivated to keep getting to the next level. So I never, ever pat myself on the back and say, yeah, I'm there. But I would say, a couple of moments, right? There's, we were talking about draw before. I will never forget when I made a big enough commission to finally pay off the draw and put money in the bank. So I thought that maybe that was like a key one where I said, okay, I'm now at the point where I'm making a living and I can sustain myself and I don't have to worry that, am I going to have to move home or do any of those things? I was there. And by the way, I was living in a cheap rent stabilized studio apartment in Murray Hill on the east side. So I didn't have to commute from Rutherford. By the way, fascinating story. When I finished college, I ended up moving into a house with a bunch of friends in Rutherford and then East Rutherford. So I was basically leaving this shared house, walking a quarter mile to the Rutherford train station, taking the train to Hoboken, and then taking the PATH train into the city to go to work every day. So when I basically about the same time I paid back the draw and had money in the bank, I said sayonara to my FDU friends that were all in the house in East Rutherford, and I rented a rent-stabilized studio apartment in a doorman building in beautiful Murray Hill, New York at 35th and Lex for $600 a month. And I was so excited to be moving into the city. It was like a game changer because, by the way, now I was living in my market. What I was doing every day, walking around the city from a job aspect, now I wasn't getting on a train and leaving my market at night. I was living in the city, working in the city. So I guess if I had to pick a moment where I feel like, kind of something flipped, I think that maybe that moment was one of them, right? For sure. I would also say, like, for me, like a proud moment was a moment when I could actually afford to buy my first condominium on the east side in New York. So that was kind of cool. I, as a studier of real estate, I watched a building go bankrupt that I really thought was an awesome building, a glass luxury condominium in the East 30s. And I watched it go bankrupt, and I watched a Chinese investor buy the building. I watched them put renters into it, and then I watched them do a slow turnaround in the building. And just when the market started to turn again, I went in and I met with the owner's representative, and I said, this is the line I want. When you guys decide you want to stop renting and you want to sell, I'm ready to buy one. And they basically called me back like 3 months later and said, okay, we have a distressed unit coming back. Here's the number. The unit's going to look like shit when you get it back. Excuse me. Sorry. It's going to look very bad when you get it back because the renter in it destroyed the apartment, but it's going to be a great deal. And I remember I was so excited when I went in, I saw the unit. I didn't care that the interior was destroyed. I knew I was going to renovate it anyway, but I was so excited. I had the money. I could pull this together and buy my first apartment in Manhattan. That was exciting too, I think.
Definitely an inspiring story. I agree. Arkady?
I would also say the same thing. I think it's just there are, little kind of moments where you just, it's more of like not you made it, you just overcame pretty crazy challenges. One of my favorite things is always saying, when someone's complaining to me, I'm like, look, can't be that bad. You've survived 100% of your worst days. Sometimes like overcoming like a major challenge. And I remember, wow, like finally, and if it's, I would say that summer of, living at home, paying back the draw and like the first little bit of money hitting the bank account where I was like, wow, okay, so this is for real. And I can kind of explain to my parents like, hey, look, this is what I did. This is what I do. I know it's been a nightmare for the last, 4 years or whatever. But, a couple of years later, I paid off their mortgage, so there are definitely little moments where, you kind of like, all right, and by the way, for me, it's still like, title. Every time I get a new title, I'm like, wow, this is exciting for about a week, and that's it.
But yeah, no, these small points of success are definitely key drivers in any career, I would say. But for you especially, you know, signing deals is a big deal. Is there anything you do in particular to celebrate? Neil, I hear you're kind of a wine connoisseur. Is that something?
I don't know if I'm a connoisseur, but I do like wine. And, you know, so some people might say I'm a wine collector. Some people might say that I have an alcohol problem. I'm not sure which. But
I'm in college, so it certainly won't be the latter.
there you go. So yeah, no, I would say, yeah, from time to time we definitely sell. What's interesting is that a lot of these bigger corporate deals, sometimes we do closing dinners. So, you know, the tenant, the landlord, the attorneys from both sides, sometimes the brokerage firms from both sides, and they're pretty sizable dinners. These can be, you know, 10 to 20 people. And, you know, we'll take a private dining room in one of the great restaurants in Manhattan. Of course, that has been on hold now for about 7 months. But we frequently do those. And yeah, we will celebrate by doing something like that. And we'll open up special bottles of wine. And it's fun. It's a nice way. You know, what happens is in these transactions, we haven't really talked about what we, you know, but there's a lot of friction in these transactions. There's a lot of fighting over a lot of different things. And, you know, while when it gets done, everybody's happy and excited and it's over, but there's a lot of friction to get to that closing point. And so one of the nice things about having those closing dinners is, you know, it's a good opportunity for everybody to basically to kiss and make up, because there's a lot of fighting that goes on to get these things done.
Yeah, leaving on a good note is definitely something you need in a relationship.
Absolutely. And one of the things I always tell everybody is, look, make me the bad guy, because here's the thing. You're entering into a 15 or a 20-year lease or 10 or year lease with this landlord. So the most important thing is that you have a great relationship with them, because you're going to have to interact with each other. You're going to need them for things. They're going to need you for things. So you guys should have a great relationship. Anything, any sourness that went on, just blame it on me, because I'm off to the next thing. I'm a mercenary. I'm on to the next one. And I'm really not worried about what the landlord thinks, because I don't work for landlords. I only work for tenants. Blame it on me. I'm the jerk. And you guys go on and have a happy marriage together. So, you know, I try to throw the dinner to make up for all of the things that maybe I was falsely accused of doing during the transaction, but it all works out in the end.
Got it. Arkady, how do you celebrate your little wins and big wins?
He hits a very hard tennis ball.
You know, similar to that, you know, they opened up the dining stuff actually in New Jersey. So next Thursday, we made a reservation at the River Palm to celebrate a deal that we closed in the middle of COVID. The guy actually came to my building in Edgewater, signed the sublease, and I had to go somehow find a New Jersey notary in my building because like the guy couldn't sign it. I'm like, you know, I'm knocking on doors. I'm like, guys, this is, by the way, it's pretty easy. Hey, everyone, who needs office space and who's a notary? So it's pretty amazing. And, you know, we were joking around actually, and the guy actually ended up, my wife does residential real estate in New Jersey in the middle of COVID. The same guy who did the office deal for actually ended up buying a place on the waterfront. So, you know, it's always just been a joke. Like, by the way, we're just going to have to go celebrate at the River Palm, you know, so, and they just opened it up. So we're going next Thursday. It also depends. It depends on, you know, what the client likes. If they like to go hunting, we'll take them up to Orvis in upstate New York. If they like to play tennis, that's an easy one. If, you know, it also depends on like the client's interest. And again, you can spend years getting to know some of these clients and tenants. And, you know, the other interesting part is, you know, we're usually dealing with, you know, sometimes the facilities people, sometimes the C-level executives. So, you know, in your first couple of years in commercial real estate, you literally get like a JD MBA, because you're learning everything from the, you know, legal obligations in the lease to how every single executive in every different type of industry is thinking. It's really amazing. And like, you know, And even talking to just my, day-to-day friends, they're like, wow, like, how do you know so much about my business? I'm like, oh, I did, so-and-so's deal. And, the whole time I dealt with this, they're like, oh, so-and-so, Mr. CEO. I'm like, yes, I had to deal with him and he's a pain and I'm, never want to talk to him again. It's very interesting.
So knowing all these people, going through the times and, building all these relationships, let's talk about the elephant in the room. It's so unfortunate that, we can't be in person for this meeting, but I'm still happy to be able to speak to both of you virtually. How has being virtual through most of the summer been for you two? For Katie?
I think it started off, everyone's like, hey, there's going to be an exodus from office and this is it. People are going to, start moving to Utah and Colorado and, Montana, and no one's going to be in New York. And, in the last, I would say 3 months, there's been kind of realization that, hey, productivity is down. And why is productivity down is because you can't really, you don't have the office atmosphere. You don't have, your normal day-to-day interaction with your colleagues. And, everyone's like, hey, we can't get back to the office fast enough. So that quickly changed. I would say that the first 3 months, it was, definitely challenging where, every tenant wants, information that we're like, hey, we don't know what's going on. We need to see statistics for the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months before we can really formulate, this is the appropriate rent, or this is what other folks are doing. So you have to get creative. It's a lot of hand holding and you're kind of, just kicking the can down the road. Some deals we were able to, renegotiate and, but there's always a payback. And some landlords took the position of like, hey, look, we're not your bank and, we're in trouble also. So, the first, I would say 3 months was definitely hard conversations. Then it kind of, I think everything pretty much kind of went on a pause, and we're still in like a price discovery mode where, tenants think that the world is still falling apart and, everything needs to be 25% off, and landlords are kind of in the, okay, well, we'll give you 10% off, so there's a little bit of discrepancy, and it hasn't kind of, I think we still need a couple of more months to see kind of where everything kind of lands in New York City.
Neil, you've alluded to kind of wanting to be back in the city. Do you agree?
You're on mute.
Every now and then I forget. Sorry about that.
All good.
So first of all, I would say that there's definitely a push for people that do want to be in New York, but I will also tell you that something we were talking about maybe before we officially started the program. I think one of the biggest hurdles is that because this city has extraordinary density and is so reliant on public transportation, it's going to be a very slow slog to get people back to the offices, even if they want to come back. So I know there's been a lot of stuff in the press about companies saying you don't have to come back anytime soon. Some companies like JP Morgan saying, they want to get people back in as soon as possible. It's going to be very difficult. I would tell you that probably after our own firm, and we're in commercial real estate, we basically shut our offices around the country all the way through 4th of July. And we didn't reopen until after 4th of July. And we invited, just a small percentage of the people back to come to the office. And over time, we've increased that percentage. And I will tell you what, honestly, as of probably today, I was in the office today, I would tell you that we were probably at maybe 10% of our people were in the offices today. And it's because of all those hurdles that we're talking about. And we're in the business. We're the ones who are supposed to be in and pushing people coming back to the office. And it's very tough. And I would tell you in some of our suburban offices, there's a higher return rate because there are lower barriers to getting back. People are getting in their own car with their lunch, they're driving to the office. These are 2- and 3-story suburban buildings, most of them. So they don't even have to get on an elevator if they don't want to. Oftentimes in those suburban offices, the space allocations are very generous because the office space is far less expensive than in Midtown Manhattan or in San Francisco. So the space is more generous and people can be more socially distanced. So we have, 20, 30, and even 40% return rates in some of our suburban offices. And we have some clients who are experiencing a little bit of that. But in the urban centers, I think it's going to be a while before we see people coming back. No question. And it wouldn't surprise me if we were only at 30 or 35% occupancy in office buildings, in urban office buildings, by middle of 21. We have a ways to go.
All that being said, are you picking up on any trends that are going on, at least in the urban centers? Are firms expanding to meet socially distant office spaces, or are they going to be cutting back to not have that much wasted space when only 30, 40% of their workforce is going to be in the office? What have you?
Yes, 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 yes. So the answer is all of those things and more. So I can tell you here, I'll give you a bunch of the different trends that we're seeing, and I'm sure Arkady's seeing, we're all seeing the same thing. So, but I'll just run down what we're seeing. Number one, any company that has an upcoming critical action date, like a lease expiration or an option notice date or anything that they have to deal with, is trying to push that date back as far as humanly possible. Why? Number one is that they have no idea where this economy is going, although it's probably not moving up. It's right. The assumption is that we're in a recession that will probably deepen. The second thing is that they want to see how that changing economy is going to affect their business, and they just don't know yet. We're only in the third inning of this thing, so it's going to be a while before people really understand that. So they want to delay for that reason. The next thing is, in our business, everybody wants to understand how the pandemic is going to affect how people use space, what the workplace is going to look like, what's safe and what's not, touchless technology, open workspace, closed workspace. All of that information, we don't have the data on it yet. So people want to delay till there's more of that data. And then last but not least, I think every smart tenant and any well-advised tenant is being told, hey, if you can delay, it is much likely that the office market will be softer months from today or maybe next year than it is today. So if you can delay your decision-making, you'll probably do better economically. You'll strike a better set of economics by doing so. So that's trend number one that was broken down into 4 or 5 different bullets. Trend number 2 is that if people do have to actually execute on a lease, we're seeing the vast majority of tenants do what I call punt, which is a short-term renewal. So most, the average lease term in office space on these big leases is, 5, 7, 10, 15, 20 years. These are long-term obligations. So many tenants today are coming in and saying, can I do a 1-year renewal? Can I do a 2-year renewal, a 3-year renewal? And by the way, they're asking to do that for all of the same reasons I just pointed out as to why people are delaying, because they don't have a crystal ball. They can't really see where things are going. And so in order to basically get more information behind them, let's delay and do that. I'll tell you that, just to give you an example of that, my team represents E&Y for the eastern half of the United States. So we're overseeing 50 different leases for them here. And we were, at the time of the pandemic, we had leases negotiated but not yet signed for 4 different transactions for them for 10 years of term. And they came back to us as the pandemic set in and said, can you go back to each of our landlords and ask them if they'll consider a 2 or 3 year renewal? And because they were sizable transactions and because it was EY, every one of the landlords sat down and renegotiated with us and agreed to do the 3-year deals. And by the way, great for EY, great for the landlords. Everyone lives to fight another day, but these are another one of the trends that we're seeing. Arkady, you want to jump in? Any Do you agree on those trends? Any other trends that you've seen that are?
You know, the one big thing was, if you look at Matterport and a lot of these virtual touring firms, how busy they've gotten. I would say in January and February, if you look at commercial real estate, no one, the virtual tours, you got the emails from the firms that are conducting virtual tours and trying to, grow their business. You're like, this is just a waste of time. No one's doing this. This is so residential. Now you're waiting up to a month to get an appointment with these companies. That's been a big thing where the commercial market adapted within a couple of weeks of like, okay, we can do virtual tours, which has never been a thing previously. The one other thing that, as the market kind of gets back to somewhat normal, another trend that's going to develop is, there's always been a kind of flight to quality, but at a discount, where the better buildings, new construction, always lease first. So we anticipate that the leasing in the higher quality buildings there's going to be kind of a flight to that. But again, it's going to be, if it's trading at $100 a foot, it could be in the 80s or mid 70s now. And we're seeing a little bit of just de-densification more across the legal services, where law firms were doing 2 associates per office. We're seeing that they're scaling back from that, and in some cases are actually in the process of picking up additional space to de-densify and accommodate, in this case, taking more space to accommodate better seating for their employees.
Yeah, and on that, that was something that you asked that I had forgot to comment on. You asked if anyone's actually taking more space in order to essentially afford for social distancing. I would say the vast majority of firms are not, but there are a few. Arkady mentions there are some law firms that are doing it. We represent a big financial trading firm that is trying to get more of their folks back in the office. So what's interesting is they're asking us to get them temporary space. So like 1 and 2 year built furnished space near their existing headquarters, so that they can get people in relatively stress-free with lots of space. The other interesting thing is short-term space is generally traded at a discount as well. So if we can buy a bunch of space very inexpensively for a year or two, just to make people feel more comfortable. So that's a strategy we're working on for this particular client. But I would say what's fascinating is that most of the clients we're speaking to now are going the other route, which is they really realize that they probably won't need all the space that they have under lease in the future. And many of them are asking us to work on coming up with predictive models as to how much economic return they could obtain if they were to dispose of 10% or 20% or 30% of their space envelope here in New York or in San Francisco or in Chicago or Dallas. We're looking at a number of different scenarios. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out. I think a lot of these companies didn't actually want to put that space on the market until they actually felt that there was somebody at home to show it to. And I think whether it's true or not, a lot of people, I think, thought that Labor Day would probably be a good period of time to maybe start to think about putting space on the market. So one trend I believe you will see is that in the coming months, in the next few weeks and into the coming months, I think you're going to see a lot more sublet space come on the market all around the country. Not that we have to digress into it, but San Francisco saw something I've never seen before. They were at a 2% availability rate before the pandemic, and they're now north of 12% because all of the tech companies, not the FANG tech companies, but all of the next gen tech companies all dumped millions and millions of square feet of sublet space on the market in San Francisco. It's startling.
Okay, I do want to know.
In New York, you have all the available space. You have 25% of that right now is sublet space.
But
Yep, and the majority of that we have it broken down by industry, the top 3 sectors. You have media and entertainment that's kind of leading that. Financial services, technology is in third place. The law firm and telecom is actually the lowest of that.
We are approaching our final minutes. I do want to say to everyone in the call, if you have any questions at all, feel free to put them in the chat. Might be able to get to them. But I do have a final question. So along with virtual tours, what are some maybe emerging technologies or even strategies like, 5-team, let's say department, one person in the office each week? Are there any technologies or strategies that are, have been coming up that people are adapting to the virus with? What you've seen?
Well, I can certainly tell you that the technologies we're seeing are touchless technology, obviously everywhere. I would tell you that that air quality, HVAC filtering, high quality MERV filters are coming into all of the office buildings now. Much more fresh air ratio. It used to be that 5 to 10% exchange of fresh air per hour. Now they're going to a much higher percentage, to the extent the buildings can even do that. Ultraviolet systems are coming in. I think any building that didn't have an elevatoring system that like destination dispatch, where you didn't have to touch buttons, I think anyone that didn't have it is going to that now, certainly in the more vertical types of buildings. So those are just a few technology changes I think you'll see that they were already in process, but the pandemic was like an accelerant. Yeah.
And I wouldn't say that commercial real estate is super tech heavy. I think there's always these new disruptors that are trying to innovate and start new things. So we have yet to, hopefully, with the downtime of 6 months, hopefully, there's some new stuff in the works. But I wouldn't say commercial real estate is super heavy on the tech stuff. Would you agree, Neil?
I would totally agree. And what's interesting is, somebody is going to figure out a great application in commercial real estate that is going to be wildly successful. Maybe it's somebody that's on this Zoom call. I certainly hope it is. But I can also tell you that literally for the last 20 years, I have seen so many different technology companies come into our space to try to figure out a way to make our business more efficient. In every aspect of the business, including, by the way, trying to figure out a way to actually get rid of the brokers, thinking that the brokers actually are in the way of getting the transactions done rather than being facilitators. And I've watched a half a dozen technology companies come in to do that. And what's fascinating is none of them have been able to do that, because our trades, what it is we do, is much more sophisticated than just a bid ask on a price. If you think about buying a house, someone's asking $400,000, I bid $350,000. Eventually you end up with a number, you give the contract to a lawyer and they figure it out. What we do is so much more sophisticated than that. I think it's going to be very difficult to tech us out of what it is we do. But I do believe that over time, technology will improve what it is that we're doing.
Great. I do have a question in the chat from Neil Diadamo. There's been a trend of a lot of residential New Yorkers coming to New Jersey and buying homes with cash during the lockdown. Do you see a lot of people moving back or out of the city with rental prices dropping, or do you think this trend will continue? I guess is the movement out of urban centers?
Yeah, well, maybe I should answer that since I live in the city and I can tell you what I'm seeing. There's no question. I mean, tons of people have moved out or are moving out. I think that seems to have slowed a little bit, but there's plenty of action out in the suburban markets. If you speak to residential brokers in the suburban markets, and maybe Arkady lives with somebody, I think, who knows a little bit about this. But I would tell you that there's no question that a lot of rental buildings here in Manhattan have vacancy, the likes of which we've never seen before. You rarely see buildings with real vacancy in rental buildings in Manhattan, and we're definitely seeing that. And we also are seeing, some, apartments, people who owned apartments, actually some of them are buying elsewhere and they're putting their apartments on the market for sale in Europe. The for sale inventory has not dramatically increased here. So I think that there are plenty of people that are leaving, but I think they were people who were less attached. So those were renters, people less attached to the city. At least that's been my observation so far. Arkady, what are you seeing, and what's
Yeah,
your
just on, on the New Jersey residential front, there's definitely a, very, even during the pandemic, my wife was, they have a family office of, 10 people, and, they were switching off like who goes into work because it was very busy. And, you have multiple bids on residential homes, especially in nicer areas. And the other thing that there's a lot of competition on is just multifamily investment properties because the rates are so low. And you have investment properties that, in January were $400,000 that are suddenly getting bid up, by up to $100,000 in, not so great areas because, there's just the rates are so low and there's, people are looking to potentially diversify some of their income. I think also on the, the exit from New York City, if you look at the cycles, there's always a lot of also creatives that, that in, pre-pandemic may have not been able to afford to live in New York, but it's always been sort of their, dream or desire to be in the city. And I think we, potentially in a couple of months, if there's some sort of vaccine or things settled down, I think that there could be another round of just a flood of those creatives that are, again, they're, starting businesses and, bringing kind of the city back to life. We obviously saw that after 9/11 where, it was deeply discounted. It took a couple of years to get back, but it's been more alive than ever.
Got it. Well, so that's going to be it for tonight. Neil, Arkady, I'd like to thank you both so much for having this chat with us. Thank you for coming out. I guess I'll hand it back over to Mary.
Yes, Tomas, great job moderating. Awesome.
Yeah,
And,
great job.
Really
I
good.
agree.
Neil
Super.
and Arkady, you guys were fabulous. This is one of the best sessions ever. Students still stay on because we're going to do our wheel with our prize. But again, thank you so very, very, very much. You guys were great.
Our pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks. All right, students, stay on. We're going to do spin the wheel and see who wins the sweatshirt tonight.
Mary,
Take care.
can you give Jeremy access?
Yeah, students, don't hang up.
You also need the QR code for Suitable.
Oh, yes. So you can't leave yet. But this is great. Okay, Jeremy, you have access. Okay, let's see. Jessica Reel. Where are you, Jessica? Is Jessica here? Wait, Jessica has to be here to win. Do we see Jessica? Paige?
I don't.
Pat?
If she's not here, we could spin it again.
If she's not here, we're going to spin it again. Pat? All right, let's spin it again.
Looking. I just hit her.
While you spin it again, don't forget, Seth Greenberg is Wednesday night. That's going to be amazing. Please join us. That's going to be huge.
Oh, Sarah! Yay! I know Sarah's here. I saw her. She's one of our freshmen. Sarah, that's great. Congratulations.